welcome back. We're looking forward to continue Be'ezus Hashem on page Kufchav Beis, which this is Igeres HaKodesh Tezvav, which is the 15th Holy Epistle. This is the fourth segment of Sefer Tanya Kadisha. We spoke about this many times. The Tanya is comprised of 5 segments, for that matter, corresponding to this is the Teresh Biksav of Teresh Hachsidus, as known, thus the number 5. But this is the fourth segment. We had a presentation. Again, repeat this briefly. We had a presentation of the backdrop of Igeres HaKodesh in the 10th Igeres, in the 10th beginning of the 10th letter, and it's just really a click away. We're holding in the center of the page, so in other words, no need to repeat, because it's always good to have the backdrop of, if you're a newcomer, of course. If you're not, you heard it a number of times, but it's good to have a backdrop of the Igeres HaKodesh. It's definitely very distinct of the previous first 3 segments, as we explained a number of times and pointed out a number of times, but you have, again, a full presentation at the beginning of the 10th Igeres, just a few back, which again we're holding presently on the 15th. So we're holding in the center of the page, which is a new paragraph, the generalization of the 10 Sphirot of the Neshama of man. So what are we talking about? So if you're following, you know what we're talking about, particularly this very Igeres. I believe this is the 4th class on this Igeres. We mentioned then it's quite a lengthy letter, a lengthy epistle, but if you're not, it's really a click away wherever you're watching it, but namely on the original website, tanyaonline.com, tanyaonline.com. You have all the previous classes lined up on the left side of the screen, and you would take note. This is the 4th class. Just tap into the previous class to be really adjacent to this, even though again it's you have to pretty much have an understanding of the entire chapter to understand where the Alter Rebbe is entering, because if you think about it, again, you can't say the Alter Rebbe veered off, because every word of the Alter Rebbe, there's no such a thing, just, felt that he would just insert an idea, every idea of the Alter Rebbe, even though it seems, just kind of parenthetically said, is of course is a very, very important message on its own. In this case, the Alter Rebbe began, and he dedicates the chapter to this Mipsori Echzelaka, for my flesh I'm able to see the godly reality, and he's here to explain us the 10 Sphirot. Just mention another point of it in a moment. We have in the past, but just to re-note. But so he wants to say that just like on high there's the 10 Sphirot, so too below, meaning to say, in the system of the Yid, in the Neshama of the Yid, there are the 10 Sphirot, but he spends a whole entire, almost a page and a half, explaining, for that matter, a full, like calculated together, like a full 2-side page over here, explaining us that as much as we are a derivative, or we evolve from on high, and therefore, just like on high, there's the 10 Sphirot, so we do as well. We also have the 10 Sphirot, again, as part of the Neshama, Umipsari Echzelaka, because we come from the Elaka, particularly the Yid, which is a Chelik Elaka Mimal, a part of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So if on high there's the 10 Sphirot, by the Yid there's the 10 Sphirot. This is namely the message of the Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe goes off again in a lengthy presentation, and he explains us that make no mistake, in the end of the day, it's not like, it's on high, so probably very similar, the way I function as a Yid resembles perfectly the on high, and therefore I could have right away an understanding and a capture of what's going on high. Comes the Alter Rebbe, says, even Avraham Avinu says, Anechi Ofer Ve'efer. Of course, as it evolves, we have those 10 Sphirot, but not to make a mistake that it's just like one story over. The Avram Avinu, which was Avram Oihavi, his chesed represented the chesed of Atzilus, as it says, Omra Midas Hatzil, the Midah of Chesed, Fnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that we quoted this one of the last classes, that from the day Avraham Avinu was created, I'm out of a job, because Avraham Avinu kind of substitutes, Avraham Avinu represents the Midah of Chesed of Atzilus. Again, if you learned the Tanya, we know when we say Atzilus, it's not just like a lofty, high, holy, sanctified world. It's a world that houses the Ein Sof. The Chesed of Atzilus is bli gvul, is infinite. Again, I'm saying this succinctly, but because we spoke about this so many times. Bli gvul Chesed, and Avraham Avinu substitutes, Avraham Avinu represents that Chesed to the extent that Midas Chesed kind of complains or relates this to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that Avraham kind of took over my function, my job. So that's in one hand. Conversely, Avraham Avinu says, "Vanechi offer va'efer," to say that in the end of the day, just like, and again, is the Alter Rebbe's beautiful explanation over here, so eloquently presented with that precision that we could capture the idea so easily. Avraham Avinu used precisely, not just wanted to use terminologies which is humble himself in the face of the Creator, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and again in context, that was in that dialogue he had with HaKadosh Baruch Hu regarding the episode of Shteim and Ameira, right? Remember that we mentioned always, we generally say it's always good when we speak about a certain pirush, the way it's explained in different inner explanations and inner dimensions of that same phrase, and particularly based on the Teres Achsidus. This is always good to remember and have it and understand it on its simple basis. This was, again, this expression was when he was that back and forth with Hashem regarding the story of Sdom and Amorah, but the Alter Rebbe teaches it over here. Those words were very precise. It wasn't just a demonstration of humbleness, humility in the face of the Creator. It was precise with, again, those expressions with precision. Avraham Avinu was trying to say that just like the afer, the ash, in comparison to that beautiful blossoming tree, there's no comparison at all, to the extent that we look at the pile of ash, we don't even see the connection. How is this ash, the residue of this beautiful tree? Two different worlds. So this was the message of Avraham Avinu, that in the end of the day we should make no mistake that we should believe that we are just a quick evolvement of the On High, so we perfectly represent the On High. It's just maybe one or two stories over us, again, figuratively. Of course, no, in comparison to the ash, in comparison to the beautiful tree, that's the comparison of our system, of our 10 Sphirot, in comparison to the 10 Sphirot on high. And even Avraham Avinu says, despite, as is brought again, quoted from the Sefer Abayir, that Chesed Atzilus says that I have no vocation over here because Avraham Avinu took over the functionality of Chesed, of Atzilus. Really? Yes, that's what Chesed of Atzilus relates to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Together with that, conversely, Avraham Avinu says that in the end of the day, it's all the ash in comparison to the beautiful tree. Again, you have to see it. I'm saying this briefly, of course. And then Alter Rebbe adds that this is just Avraham Avinu's expression, but it's lahavdil ba'alafim havdalis. The difference is way, way grander, right? Dibra Torah, in the end, Torah uses a lashon that just to capture someone's mind, to see the vast difference and the diametrical difference of the stark difference, that is, of the ash in comparison to the beautiful tree. But it's beyond that. And here the Alter Rebbe comes back and says, ultimately, as much as the difference is so stark, but the reason why, in the end of the day, we have these 10 spheres, it's because it evolves from on high. We are a chelik, a yid is a chelik al kami mal mamash. So ultimately, if it exists by Hashem, of course, in the end, as it evolves, level after level after level after level after level after level, le'ein kates, there's the 10 spheres. The way the yid functions, the human being functions, and particularly when you talk about the neshama of the yid, functions with these very 10 spheres. Because from my system, I'm able to identify Kodesh Baruch Hu because we evolve from Kodesh Baruch Hu. So together with it not mamish resembling, again in this expression, you have to see the last few classes, namely the last class. But together with that, we do evolve from Mount High, and therefore we have the 10 Sphirot, and our 10 Sphirot function similar, or rather the reason why it reflects every single midah, we can see that parallel one way or another to the spirit of the midah on high, because in the end of the day, it does evolve from the on high, and neshama comes from the on high. We are a chelik, a part of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So in the HaKadosh Baruch Hu, in the system, the way Hashem set up, they say the ishtalshul is the order of evolution, but starting namely from Atzilus, which is, again, it's not just, we mentioned so many times, not just another world on high, the highest world, formerly the highest world, but no, Atzilus is a different dynamic. This is the world which lo yigur chara, no evil means, yes, even the most subtle evil, the subtle, out of, so to say, the full potent energy of the oneness of Hashem that doesn't exist in Atzilus. It's a world which houses the oneness of Hashem, every midah, every nekuda, every idea of Atzilus, the Eires, the Kelim, as the famous expression, Iyu v'chayei chad, Iyu v'garmei chad, Hashem and the Eires of Atzilus are one, Hashem and the Kelim of Atzilus are one. Every Sphira, again, has this bleak vul, this infinite energy, because it's a world which hosts and houses the Ein Sof, the infinite. Because we spoke about it so many times. If you're following, or other places, easy to find different, again, areas which we spoke about this idea, this Eilam Atzilus, even towards the very beginning of the Sefer Tanya, namely when the Atzilus is spoken about and elaborated on in the first, in all the segments, but namely in the first segment. I would just say, place of reference in Pedic Lamed Tes. That would be Lamed Tes. That speaks about the difference between the different Eilamis, and he points out again, Atzilus is not just an Eilam which is a bit higher. Atzilus, where the neshama comes from, where that again famously we have in Pedic Beis, the second chapter in the first segment, L'Kutei Amorim, also a click away. It's all a click away. It's very, very easy to access, particularly on the original website, again, the tanyaonline.com, as all the classes from the very, very beginning of the first segment is lined up, and it's really a click away. But the Alter Rebbe has it. Then again, in the second chapter, the Alter Rebbe points out how we come from Atzilus, and not only Atzilus, but Chochmah Atzilus, which is the highest level of the world of Atzilus. For that matter, Chochmah is also, we say Atzilus is not just a higher world, it's a different dynamic completely in comparison to Bri, Yitzir, Asir, and all the other worlds, as the Alter Rebbe says. There's many, many infinite amount of Eilamis, even though they're generally divided and compartmentalized into these four. But within Atzilus itself, Chochmah Atzilus is a total different idea, which again, you can see it second and third chapter of the L'Kutei Amorim, the first segment. This being the fourth, again, the first segment toward the beginning. So again, you can see it at the 39th. It just said Lamed Tes. The Rebbe has this whole presentation of Tzilus, Bri, Yitzir, Asiyah, and again in a context, of course, a good place of reference to see when we speak about Atzilut, Bri, Yitzir, Asiyah. It's not just the highest world, it's a different phenomenon, and that's where the neshama comes from. So the neshama has Yud Sfiris. Back to what he's beginning over here of Klolos, Yud Sfiris, Nishmas Adam. Now, this is the objective of the Alter Rebbe. You see the very beginning of the Alter Rebbe begins with this, and then he goes off and to say, let's have perspective. He speaks about the Nechi Offer Ve'efer of Avram Avinu. Alter Rebbe comes right back to it. Now, we did mention a few times that this is a lengthier chapter. The Alter Rebbe speaks about the 10 Sphirot in the third chapter of L'Kutei Amorim, in the very beginning of his work, of the Tanya Kadisha. This is the magnum opus of the Alter Rebbe, the Tanya. But he doesn't elaborate on the 10 Sphirot with such detail till the fourth segment of the 15th chapter, the 15th epistle, which is interesting on its own. He does speak about Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes, other places also. He speaks about the Midas and Malchus, of course, a few times. But an organized presentation and explanation of the 10 spheres, he doesn't have in the beginning. Even that Gimel, the third chapter, which he kind of takes an x-ray what's going on with the neshama and the experience of the neshama, the godly soul. He goes Chesed, Gvura, Avo, Yira, representing Avo, Yira, and then he goes Ve'anfeihem. Mentions, I think, the word Tiferes, but again, namely the Avo, Yira, Chesed and Gvura, Ve'anfeihem and their branches. And then And in the end of the day, the 5 spheres are, of course, branches of Chesed and Gvura. These are the chief spheres. Explain the number of places you could infer this from, even the explanation over here of the Chesed and Gvura. And wherever you learn about Chesed and Gvura, we can appreciate how they are the chief Sphirot, and all the spheres come from manifest, evolve rather. They are the branches of the Chesed and Gvura. I wonder if he even mentions this, the word Tiferes over here. I just recall that he does. But in any case, he does say clearly these are the branches. But in this presentation, again, all the way in the 4th segment, he has a this is where the famous, if you will, because this is a chapter, a presentation here, which has a full, detailed layout, an explanation of every single sphere, starting from Chochmah, Bina, Das, Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes, Netzach, Chayv, Yisod, Malchus, and in different levels between man and his fellow friend, and of course the Alter Rebbe reaches to the ultimate, again, in the spheres, the way they represent the Nefesh Elikis, the godly soul, thus in the godly service of man with his creator, man and Hashem. So we continue, and here the Alter Rebbe goes back, and interesting, it's divided. It's very unusual. As you know, we learn Tanya, the Alter Rebbe should break up. I believe in Kuti Amorim, there's only 4 chapters, four chapters which are broken up into paragraphs. 4 out of 53, and so too in the others. Most of the Alter Rebbe's presentation in Tanya, that is. And there's reasons for it also, that it's not really broken up. It's very rarely you can see in all the segments of Tanya, all the 5 segments. Here, the Alter Rebbe breaks it. You could say it again, a simple idea, because the Alter Rebbe explained us had a whole presentation, which is again a little bit off what the initial this epistle begins with, because the objective is to say Mipsari Achselaka, explaining how the neshama represents on high, and then he goes on. He wants to say we should have things in perspective, in context, in perspective, and understand this, the dynamics of it, that it's not just like, again, by Hashem, just a little bit less, but it's pretty much similar. No, the Alter Rebbe goes on for that whole equation, but of course, now the Alter Rebbe begins, V'hinei, he comes right back to the Klolos Yitzfiris, a new beginning, a new paragraph, namely connected to the beginning of this very epistle. So let's try to get right into it. Can't say right into it, to be honest, but let's go on. Klolos HaYitzfiris Sheb'nishmas Adam, the 10 Sphirot of the neshama of man. It's known, b'derech klal, generally, shamidas, nechlokis, b'derech klal, zaymidas. The attributes, character, are divided in 7 attributes. And all the details, when you find a particular expression, a particular emotion, a particular attribute, which you don't say, that's purely chesed, draw the line, you'll see that it comes from one of the 7. Because of the overall, there is 7, no more. 7 general midas, and all details would derive from these 7. They're the source of all the midas, all attributes, uklaluson, and again, in a generic manner. Shehein, and he begins midas hachesed. Of course, when he speaks about the chesed, he begins with the character of chesed. Now, I just want to mention, we pointed out, Alter Rebbe speaks in this chapter of Chochmah Bina Das as well, but he's going to connect it, and he's going to point out at the end of the day, like he mentioned in the third of the first segment, the first segment, Lukuti Amorim, click away. There, the Alter Rebbe actually begins with the cognitive faculties, Chochmah Bina Das, and then he goes on to the midas, which are toldes, which are offsprings of the Chochmah Bina Das. Here he begins with the midas, and eventually he'll come in with a connection with the Chochmah Bina Das, as we'll look forward as Hashem and HaKadosh to see. So the Alter Rebbe begins with the first midah, which is the midah of chesed, of kindness. I just want to mention also chesed and gvura are the chief midas, but between even chesed and gvura, chesed is the lashon and zayir. It's a midah that azlinim kuli. It goes with all of them. Again, we will learn the midas. We'll maybe come back to it to point out. To have a little explanation, a little appreciation. What does the zayir mean that it's a midah which azlim kuli yamin? How could it go with kuli yamin with all the seven? Again, yamin is literally translated as days, 7 days of the week. So it's referring to all the midas. How could chesed go with kula yamin? Just look at its neighboring midah, which is gvura. Gvura is the antithesis of chesed, of course. How is it azim kula yamin? But we'll get there. We'll look forward to remember to explain this idea of zayir. So it's not only the first, but it's really the chief of the chief, meaning to say, Alter Rebbe writes there in Gimel that is chesed and gvura are the chief midas, and all the other midas are branches from the chesed and gvura, but within chesed and gvura, chesed is really the midah, and therefore it's the first for that matter. So it's the midah of chesed, kindness, lashpia, b'li gvul, to provide. How much? Well, if you're talking about the Hashem's chesed, Hashem is infinite, so Hashem's chesed is infinite. What does that mean? To mashpia b'li gvul. To provide without any limit. And without any limit means without any limit. And when you're talking about Hashem's chesed, to provide without any limit in all areas of the entire evolution, order of evolution, Seder Shtalshus, but as we reaches down here in Olam HaSiyah, which everything is generally mugbal, even in context of, let's say, money, as an example, parnasa, $1 trillion is, of course, there's a gbola. $1 trillion is not $1 trillion and one. But nonetheless, because in Eilam HaMaisa, it's set up in a very, this is the setup of Eilam HaMaisa, it's a Eilam Gvuli, it's a limited world. Yeah, there's no question if somebody has a turnaround of $1 billion or $500 million, or somebody who's struggling and there's a few $1 million, there's a bli gvul in context of Elam HaMaisa, there's a bli gvul expression, understandably, because this is the setup of Elam HaSiyah, this very physical world. So if somebody is struggling and all of a sudden there's a few million or multiple millions of dollars, that's a bli gvul expression. But that's what Hashem's chesed is, because He is infinite. He's unlimited. There's nothing which limits Him. Say, oh, I can't do more. Of course, there's that's the beauty of the relationship of Hashem and the Yid, that it's all based on that it's predicated on a relationship which makes it so special and so dear, and it's commensurate, one, like any relationship, of course, but at the end of the day, when Hashem wants to open the window and He wants to express His chesed, yeah, He can. This is who He is. He's mashpia b'li gvul. That's the chesed of Atzilus. Atzilus is an Olam which represents and houses the Ein Sof, the infinity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So the chesed of Atzilus is hashpa b'li gvul. And in all areas of life, when it reflects itself in Olam HaSiyah, without any limitation. Then comes Midas HaGvura, L'tzamtzum L'shpia Kol Kach. Then when it comes to Midas HaGvura, it's the other way. Midas HaGvura is about discipline. Not to be mashpia Kol Kach so much, because of course, Alter Rebbe has this, he goes, Oy Shaloi L'ashpia Kol Iker Klal, or not to give at all. So, in which one is it? It's Kol Kach or L'ashpia Klal? Alter Rebbe has in the brackets, as you can see, Kol Iker. That means not at all. Well, that's the point of discipline. Discipline is sometimes you turn off, you minimize the hashpah, like any discipline in any relationship. A teacher, pupil, parent, child, it's healthy to discipline. So sometimes based on the actions or inactions of this party who you want to discipline, you turn it off a little bit, you let something, a trickle of ashpa come through, or sometimes it's a total kol ikir klal. Becomes kind of catastrophic, of course, in relationship of Seder Ishtalshus with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and namely Eilam HaMaisa, namely individually the Yid, or collectively Am Yisrael. It becomes, quite, but Am Yisrael, this is stuff which Am Yisrael saw in the past, but we always have to remember, it's the Gvur of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu in core essential levels, Teva Tev La'etiv, in the core level of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, He's Hashem, and Hashem is essentially good. And this is a midah of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, just to discipline and to establish, to make to make the relationship healthier and yet healthier and deeper and more profound, ultimately appreciated by us in our relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But nonetheless, of course, we ask Hashem to certainly not to do lashpia klal. Even the kolkach, there's two ways you can come close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu when he sees that bli gvul to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's explained many Sifrei Musar, Sifrei Chassidus. The person has to be wise. When he sees something grand happening, understand this didn't come out, just didn't happen by chance. Hashem opened His window of chesed for you as an individual, and be wise and grab the opportunity to strengthen your relationship with the source of this hashpah, of this energy and this bracha, this blessing, which is of course HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And the way we always should remember, the way we connect, the way we healthily establish or re-establish or strengthen our relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, there's only one way. Of course, we say thank you. There's an idea of hakaras hatov. Sometimes we say, especially someone comes out of a situation which is difficult, something's very difficult, and Hashem alleviates him, and he sees an overt miracle. He says thank you. There's a concept of a suda seidah. He gets people together and formally acknowledge that we praise HaKadosh Baruch Hu for His chesed and His wonders for man. There's a special capital Tilim, which is the Kuf Zayin, I believe Kuvav or Kuf Zayin in Tehillim. And then there's the Karban Taida. There was a sacrifice which was represented. This really corresponds. This whole idea is the idea of a Yid. In the time of the Beis HaMikdash, used to bring a Karban Taida, Karban of thanks. Of course, we do that as a formal recognition of gratitude towards HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But in the end of the day, the way we thank HaKadosh Baruch Hu is through learning Torah and doing Hashem's mitzvahs and davening and with a minyan and careful and scrupulous in Hashem's mitzvahs, the positive, the negative, the rabbanons, and so on. That's the way Hashem, that's the way Yid really gives a thank you to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's the way Yid appreciates the blessing of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the way Hashem wants us to appreciate His blessing. Saying thank you is one thing, significant as it is, but it's a matter of healthily soldiering forward in a stronger relationship in this which HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants. And again, it works. We can understand it in any relationship. There's thank you, but then I want to align myself with you who just presented me and alleviated me from a particular problem. And this has, it's perpetual, the result and the effect of this which you've done for me. So I want to more align myself with you and your desires and so on and so forth. Not thank you and I go on my way, but thank you and I identify with you. And the way we identify with HaKadosh Baruch Hu is only one way. Torah, mitzvahs, tefillah, gemilas chasadim, tzedakah, a lot of tzedakah. And of course, in a generation like today, the tzav hashah, to bring every yid into the fold, tzedakah gashmis. There's the idea, phenomenon of tzedakah, physical tzedakah, meaning to say tzedakah as donating to causes, to individuals. The more person gives tzedakah, the more, of course, is related to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Actually, in Perek Lamed Zayin, Al Terebe points out this, which is brought many times in Chazal, for that matter, in Yerushalmi, whatever it speaks about a mitzvah, it's referring to tzedakah, for that matter. The entire Talmud Yerushalmi, because Al Terebe there, you can see the Terebe says how the virtue of tzedakah, the mitzvah of tzedakah, is way greater than all the other mitzvahs, based on the Chazal. Shkula kineged kol mitzvah. Al Terebe has such a beautiful presentation explaining us why is it so special. Therefore, and therefore you'd give tzedakah. And there's another dimension in tzedakah which the Alter Rebbe mentions a few times, namely Geras HaKodesh. He has it in also in Geras HaTshuva, the third, and in the Yud in the Geras HaKodesh, the 10th in the Geras HaKodesh. You click away, the Alter Rebbe says Kol Sheyitin Lishbad Nafshi. There's another dimension, not to go into it now, of course not, but it's important to know there's another dimension of tzedakah that it's not even measured 10%, 20%. Person would give everything away because it's about tikkun nefesh. Different dimension within tzedakah. It reflects in actually giving tzedakah, but it's a different dimension, is correcting the soul, and there's no limit, just like a person would not limit how much he would give away for his body. So lots of tzedakah. There's tzedakah ruchni, is bringing another, then there's the tzedakah, in other words, in a metaphysical plane, meaning to say that, and this is for that matter, the tzav hashah, the call of the hour today to bring every yid into the fold. Put in another yid tefillin, maybe buy a pair of tefillin. Again, something we have to be very specific. How we bring yid into the fold, have a pair of tefillin with you, and you meet a yid, put him on tefillin. You don't need to pray a lot with him. You don't need to say a lot with him. Say Shema Yisrael. He has a bit more time, say a bit more. But this is again case by case. But that's the way we bring another yid into the fold. That's what Hashem wants from us now. Just like in the time of the Tanaim, of course they did all the mitzvahs which we do today, but what was their mandate? Their mandate was to present the Mishnah, to present Torah Shabbal Peh, the core, and then eventually the Amirayim, the Gemara. That was the Tzav Hashah, the call of the hour then. The call of the hour today is bring every yid into the fold of Yiddishkeit, and not to ignore. It's like we have a mission and we'll do all the stuff which we're comfortable with, and the call of the hour today is to bring another into the fold, and when we ignore that, there's a big problem, and beyond the problem, it's even be strong enough to say it's a kind of fragmentation, our relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because the call of the hour is to bring every yid into the fold. So there's tzedakah ruchnis, which we have to pay equal and beyond equal attention to, because this is what Hashem wants from us today, as we heard it from the greatest G'dolei Yisrael, true G'dolei Yisrael, of course, the Nasi of Am Yisrael, time and again, this is the call of the hour. So this is the way we enhance our relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, particularly when we always have to do it in any given time, but when we see an extra chesed of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we align ourselves with with a mandate which Hashem gave us. Not only the thank you, no, much beyond. It's the mandate from us to realign ourselves with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Shiurim in Torah, structured shiurim, on time to shiurim, minyanim, on time to minyan, Baruch Hu Baruch Shmei, Amen. Everything what Hashem wants from us to tighten that relationship more and more and more, and how much more? There is no end. Hashem is infinite. There's never a way, never, by definition, it's impossible to say, I got there. There's beyond and beyond and beyond, as spoken about quite a few in the past, on this idea that there's no end, of course. Hashem is Ein Sof. So we ask Hashem to mashpia b'li gvul, and we will be wise enough to do what we have to do to connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu with our b'li gvul, b'chol ma'oitcha. Of course, a limited establishment when you're talking about the human being, but there is a phenomenon, b'chol ma'oitcha, as we all know what means to go over the line, beyond the regular, in our devotion to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, His holy Torah, His holy mitzvahs. So this is the chesed, and then the gvura, and then the third would be tiferes, midas harachamim, mercy. To have mercy on somebody who, it makes sense, the expression of pity, compassion. So what's the difference between chesed and gvura? Kindness, compassion. You're compassionate, so you're giving, you're extending yourself. Isn't that chesed? Extending oneself to another party? On the surface, it seems the same, but it's a different midah, completely for that matter. Now, you can't say completely, because this is what really Rachmanis is all about. It's a combination of the two, of chesed and gvura. That's why it's called tiferes, for that matter. Tiferes is beauty, because beauty is when you have two colors. One color could be nice. Beauty is when you have two colors. If it's an attire, a garment, whatever it is, a garment or any two colors, a blend of two, And that's why Rachmanis is called Tiferes, because it's a blend of Chesed and Gvura. Why is it a blend of Chesed and Gvura? Because what's Tiferes? What's Rachmanis? What's compassion? Compassion says you're one way or another underscoring that Gvura is meant to be implemented over here. There is a call and a need to discipline, and not just open the faucet of Chesed just to give. You see reasons why discipline in context is healthy. But when any party is disciplined, it's difficult. And sometimes the one who's disciplining sees the difficulty of the one they're trying to discipline for good reasons. And of course, we're talking about healthy discipline. We don't, the Gemara is la b'shia askinon, la b'shuftin askinon. Odd and malicious type of that's not, we don't even talk, it's not, of course, we're not even talking about it. It's not even important to negate it. That's negated inherently. But healthy discipline is good, it's healthy, but the one who's disciplining sees the discomfort. It's not comforted to be disciplined. We all know it in all levels, children and adults. In any situation, someone goes through a difficult time, it's difficult. So sometimes when the discipline, which again, it's a genuine and pure objective goal, but they see how the difficulty of the discipline which they are trying to implement, again for good reasons, they sometimes reduce this which they established in the beginning, and they have compassion. Rachmanis, we're going to give it to you anyways, or we'll let you have it slowly, or maybe fully, but it's after the establishment of the discipline, of the presentation to the party you're trying to discipline, of this, what your objective, and again, for the reasons, the positive reasons that you needed to discipline this other party. Again, in different relationships, child, pupil, whatever. So you establish it, and then you see the difficulty of the one who you're trying to discipline, the difficult experience of the one you're trying to discipline. So you say, okay, you have rachmanis, you have compassion. So you see how this is a combination of chesed and gvura? Because by chesed, you don't even see, it's just blikul chesed, it's just giving and giving, you don't even see any reason. There might be a reason for this, but it's in the world of chesed, there's no reason to discipline, it's only about giving. We see it evidently, which is a classic example brought in Chassidus many times. Avraham Avinu says, Lui Shmuel Yechil L'Fanech. Hashem wants to give Avraham Avinu a son. And of course, it would be a miraculous experience. Yitzchak was born in a Nisi. Sarah was an Akara. She could not have children. She was 89 years old. Avraham Avinu was 99 years old. Then Hashem miraculously gave them a child, Yitzchak, which would be the successor of Avraham Avinu. But Avraham Avinu says, what do you have to make a miracle for me? Lo Yishmael, my son Yishmael Yechil L'Fanecha. He would be the one that would be the successor and so on. Really? Yishmael? Tanya says, Pera Adam, Yodeh Vakel V'Yad Kabei, a troublemaker from the very beginning of his lifetime. You see the reason why Sarah wanted to send out Hagar. Sarah was a kind person. You look at the Parsha, you kind of have to readjust your mind and heart and see what was Sarah doing. But if you look really carefully, she said clearly to Avraham Avinu, this cannot go on. Yishmael's character, he wants to destroy and take away everything. And Torah says that he was involved in a very young age, the young, tender age of, I think he was 30, whatever his age, very, very extremely young. He was, when Yitzchak was born, he was 13, but very young age. He was already involved in the 3 cardinal sins. And Avraham Avinu says, Lu Yishmael Yechil L'Fanecha. So just, it's important to say that eventually Yishmael did tshuva in his elderly age. Torah says, you see, he let Yitzchak go before him when it came to the interring of Avraham Avinu. But at that juncture, Lu Yishmael Yechil L'Fanecha, the Shmuel should move on, he should be my successor. How could you say that? But Avraham Avinu represented Chesed, as we mentioned before, earlier. And from the perspective of Chesed, you don't see anything negative. It's not that you see and you ignore. You don't see Chesed. You don't see anything negative. And as such, by extension, the reason to discipline, it's just Chesed. Chesed doesn't, it's especially Chesed of Avraham Avinu. So it makes sense that, what's the problem? Yishmal, Yichil Fanecha. What are you making miracles? Of course, Hashem corrects. Hashem comes in and he says, no, Yishmael is not your successor. Yitzchak is going to be your successor. And of course, two diametrically opposite phenomenon, personalities, in all levels. Yitzchak is Yitzchak, Avinu. Yitzchak has a famous Gemara, Kiata Avinu. But from the perspective of Ram Avinu, no issue. Rachmanis says, yes, I do see a reason why to discipline. And perhaps even I've established the Gvura in order to discipline, and healthy discipline. But I can't handle how the one who I'm disciplining is experiencing this discipline. I cannot bear the discomfort, pupil, child, whatever it is, in our relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So I'll have Rachmanis, I'll have compassion. And I'll say, take it anyways. This is why, again, Rachmanis is called Tiferes. Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes. It's beautiful because it's a combination of the Chesed and Gvura. I see reasons for discipline, but nonetheless, take it anyways. And of course, when we see that with our HaKadosh Baruch Hu's conduct with us, we do the same. We align ourselves, we re-establish, we reinvigorate our connection with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And we strengthen our control, we anchor the connection with HaKadosh Baruch Hu much more. And sometimes, particularly when Hashem has Rachmanis, because if we're honest, sometimes we say, yeah, I know why Hashem wants a discipline. This party says he knows why the Eibishter wants to discipline him or her. We're honest in our relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And then when we see Hashem as Rachmanis, of course, that calls it extracts from us a similar, maybe even beyond, motive to perfectly align ourselves, or to make the greatest effort to profoundly align ourselves with the Kodesh Baruch Hu, or align ourselves with the Kodesh Baruch Hu in deeper and yet deeper, and more profound and more profound. And again, in this, what Hashem wants. Remember, we always have to remember, Hashem wants our learning Torah, doing mitzvahs, and being careful with this which He asked us to be careful with. And all this we spoke about, and always to mention on this area, what is the call of the time, and to do it time and again. In other words, a true devotion, b'chol ma'itcha, as the pasuk says, with all your one's might. That's what Hashem wants. Of course, He wants us to do it with joy, gladness of heart, and pleasure even. But that's the way we align ourselves with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's always good to remember. Thank you is one thing, but identifying with HaKadosh Baruch Hu the way He wants to identify with Him is most important. So this is Alter Rebbe said, "Midas rachamim l'rachamim mishashayich l'shenachmanus alav." Like we said before, somebody who it makes sense to have compassion. It's an intermediary midah between Gvura and Chesed. Shehi lashpil l'kol gam shleishayich l'shenachmanus alav. Chesed klal einu chaser klum einu b'tzar klal. So Shehi is back to the Chesed, even though I see two pirushim, but on the surface I always learned that Shehi is the Chesed to provide to someone who the Rachmanis doesn't fit for him because he's not missing anything, he's not in pain, which is another way of the extension of Chesed in its pristine expression, that it's not that I'm ignoring a reason for Gvura. There's no reason to have Rachmanis because there's no Gvura, because the person's not suffering. So why do I have compassion on him? It's just Chesed, just expression of kindness. So we explained before Chesed from the perspective, the lens of Chesed, like Avraham Avinu, classically, I see Ishmael, but I don't see any reason why he should not be my successor, because I only see, because from the lens of Chesed, I don't see any reason for Gvura, for discipline. But here, the Alter Rebbe says that someone is not even in pain, he's not being disciplined, he's not missing anything. So where's the Rachmanis? And I've seen another page, he says, this is also the Rachmanis that that I provide. Someone is not missing anything, he's not making bitzar, but I have compassion on him. But the message is the same. This is what Rachmanis is. I see a reason for discipline, but nonetheless I have compassion. Well, Fishim here now in this with this we'll conclude for today. Fishim Mutzaz Nikreis Tiferes, because it's an intermediary midah, therefore that's why it's called beauty. It can make big Tiferes, like garments, vestments of beauty. A garment which is dyed with many colors. Savua literally dyed, tseva, with many colors, colorful. Miravim, which are mixed in, blended in. In brackets is boy, in the garment, in the attire, as it is shutiferes, in a way that is tiferes, is beautiful. And that's why Rachmanis, which is a blend and a combination of both, is called tiferes. Well, let's just do another line. You can't say the word beauty when you have a garment which is colored only with one color. Now, you can't say it's ugly, but he's not saying it's ugly. He just says you can't say beauty. And therefore, precisely tiferes, the word beauty is an rachmanis because it's a blend of the two spheres. So we'll stop over here for today. I just want to mention that, even a Peirik, which Al-Tereb is just describing chesed, gvura, tiferes, it's so loaded, just this word, midas hachesh v'lashpia bli gvul. Al-Tereb could have said lashpia. That's what chesed is, to provide, to give. That's bli gvul. Of course he's talking about Hashem, but he's not even talking about directly speaking about, let's talk about the chesed of Atzilut, the chesed of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is bli gvul, he's Ein Sof. So the chesed of Atzilut, which houses HaKadosh Baruch Hu, is also Ein Sof. Just nonchalantly, chesed, bli gvul. Chesed lashpia bli gvul. So we know that that option is always open by HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and of course we do ask, particularly this time of the year, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, even though sometimes we ask Hashem, should have Rachmanis, because especially when Am Yisrael as a whole experiencing Gevura, a certain, particularly these days, this past year, and so we ask Hashem to have Rachmanis, and it fits in so well over here. Have Rachmanis. It's difficult as it is, collectively, individually, Am Yisrael again, individually and collectively, of course. We ask Hashem to have Rachmanis, either way, Rachmanis, but in the end of the day, we ask Hashem for His Ashpa, B'li Gvul, infinite Ashpa, and we'll be wise. We will be wise to do what we have to do. Collectively, Am Yisrael, and of course individually. Have a wonderful night. And a good Kibbutz year.